Hi guys, hope you're doing okay and hope you are in a safe place with plenty of food, plenty of toilet paper, and you're doing okay. So I would have never dreamed that we would be doing class this way. It's not set up to do it this way, so we're all just going to kind of do the best we can. And I will probably be posting a couple of these videos for you a couple of times a week, just to keep you updated because there's a lot of information we need to get through. So here's what you need to do in the meantime until we have a real assignment is after you watch the lesson, just comment below the post. It can be anything. Hey, I got it. Thanks for the video. If you have a question, anything. Um, and then that will count as your attendance because the university does want us to continue taking attendance for these. And that is the only way right now I have to track that you are actually active and logging into the class. So I would appreciate that. I will have one today, one Wednesday, couple of housekeeping notes though before we get into the lesson. So because our semester got shortened by a lot, we will be skipping the demonstration speech, which is kind of a bummer because that is I think the most fun speech for me and for you and for everybody to watch because it's fun to watch people demonstrate stuff. But they do not want us to assign or have anybody do any speeches until after April 27th. So they have time to get everything set up online for you to upload your speeches. So we're just not going to have time. So we're going to skip right to the informative speech. And also, we will not be doing the final impromptu speech. I know that probably makes you happy, but it's actually a really fun speech too. So there's no way to do an impromptu speech, obviously online. So without doing that face-to-face, so that will not happen either. So what I know for now is we will be doing the informative speech. I'll be assigning that here in the next week or so, and you won't have an assignment besides watching these, reading the chapters, and just keeping up until next week. So this is pretty much all you need to worry about. So just to recap, obviously it's been a while since we had class, but one of the last things we talked about were when you're putting together a speech, first thing you have to do is have a topic. Second thing is what is your general purpose for this next speech? It's going to be to inform or to teach or to inform us about something, basically, is what it is. Your specific purpose is going to be to inform the class about what? What are you informing us? Are you informing us about this, one of these instruments back here? This is actually my son's room that I am borrowing right now. And there is a piano back here, but I don't play, so I'll not be playing any piano for you this semester. Your specific purpose to inform us about blank. And then your central idea, which is your thesis statement, if you remember. Your central idea is just going to be one complete sentence that tells us what your speech is about. Your main points will be in that central idea. So if I were giving a speech on this mandolin, I believe that is behind me, it might sound something like, the three primary parts to a mandolin are the body, the neck, and the strings. That's about all I know about mandolins. That would be my central idea. So moving right along, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to actually organize your speech. There's some different ways to organize it depending on what kind of speech it is. And there's different ways to transition between your main points. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And like I said, after you watch the video, just comment that you watched it, that you saw it. If you have a question or a comment or anything too, please do that in the comments section so I can count you present for class today. Now bear with me while I pull up the slides. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm going to try to do this seamlessly. Okay, so like I said, you've got to organize your speech because you can't just wing it, give it willy-nilly. You want it to make sense. You want us to follow along with your speech. So Basic reason you want to organize your speech is you want to have the result of informing us, right? We talked about how when you just tell a story, you don't necessarily have to have it in a certain structured organizational pattern. You want it to make sense, but a speech has to be a little bit more organized so that we can follow along with you. So most speeches have 2 to 5 main points. Your speeches in here probably won't have more than 3. If they do, they will probably run a little long. So once you got your central idea figured out for your speech, you're going to have your main points, and then you can start organizing. So one of the ways, we're going to talk about a few different ways to organize your speech. One of them is chronological, following a time pattern. Had you done a demonstration speech, this is probably how it would be organized, because in a demonstration speech, if I was going to demonstrate to you how to play that ukulele, which would be really scary, I would probably have a step 1, next, step 2, next, step 3. If I was going to show you how to make a pie, I would have chronological steps. So most commonly, these are used for demonstration speeches. Your informative speech might also be chronological. If you're talking about, different points in time, maybe an event in history. Gosh, maybe you give your informative speech on the coronavirus. Not like there's not going to be enough information out there about that. You could do it in chronological order. Where did it start? How did it grow? And where is it now? So there you go. Chronological, pretty easy way to organize a speech. So an example of some chronological main points, if you were giving your informative speech on esports, you could start talking about when it started. Started in the 80s. And then it became a global phenomenon in the 90s. And then it flourished through tournaments in the 2000s. And now it draws more viewers than any other traditional sports league, which blows my mind, but it's true. So you could do a chronological order with any kind of topic, really. Next way to organize your speech is spatial. That's easy to remember because you think of space in direction. This is probably the least common way to organize a speech. Don't really see very many of these. I did have one student give an informative speech about the parts of the eye and how it related to an eye disease that runs in her family. And she had a diagram of the eyeball and the different parts and the inside and the outside and all that. So that was a spatial order. But like I said, not very common. One example of a speech you would want to do spatial order is if you're giving a speech about a hurricane, or in Missouri, might be more relatable to do a speech about a tornado. What are the main parts of a tornado? That could be a spatial speech. So obviously this one, you're talking about the eye wall, and then the bands that rotate around the hurricane. So that would be an example of a spatial speech. So next way to organize a speech is causal order, cause and effect. This one most usually is used for a persuasive speech, because if you're trying to persuade us to do something or think something or change a habit, a cause and effect is a great way to do that. So one, if you're trying to persuade somebody to not drink energy drinks, high sugary energy drinks, the cause might be, wow, look at how many people are overweight in this country and are diabetic and have, sugar problems and aren't in shape. Well, sugar drinks cause people to have all those issues. So that's a cause and effect. Another example of a cause and effect main points. The US faces a growing shortage of trained nurses. Boy, that is really true these days, isn't it? Gosh, I even heard that they're calling up retired nurses right now. People aren't even doing it anymore. That's how much they need help right now in the hospitals. That's the cause. Effect, if this shortage continues, it will put a major strain on the entire health system. Cause and effect. Another way to organize a speech, problem solution. This is probably the most common way to organize a speech for persuasion. No better way to persuade somebody than to say, you know what, we have a problem, but here's the solution. These are used in marketing all the time, right? You see a commercial, see an infomercial, boy, you need whiter teeth, right? You have a problem. So the solution is buy our toothpaste. So yeah, they use it in advertising and marketing all the time. So here's an example. This would be a good one for your persuasive speech. Problem, puppy mills. Solution, legislation. You can also have problem, puppy mills. Solution, don't buy from a pet store, buy from a reputable breeder. Blah, blah, blah. Problem, solution. Topical order. This is the most common way to organize a speech. Your main points are just basically set up to be logical. They're not chronological. They're not problem solution. If I were to, once again, do a speech about this mandolin hanging on the wall here behind me, I might say, you know, like I said before, the 3 main parts to a mandolin, or the 3 different styles of playing a mandolin, or the 3 different types of music that mandolins are used in, or the 3 artists that use mandolins in their music. It can be unlimited. That's why topical is so popular, because it's easy to do. Here's an example. If you were to do an informative speech on a person, maybe somebody you admire, somebody you've read about, somebody you look up to, you could use topical order to tell us different things about that person. I had a student last semester. It was hard for me to sit through because I'm a big Chiefs fan, but he is a huge New England Patriots fan, and he did his speech on Tom Brady and told us 3 main things about Tom Brady. That was an example of a topical speech. In this case, Josephine Baker. 3 different topics about Josephine Baker. She captivated audiences as an entertainer, she was a spy, and she was an activist. So another example of topical order. Once again, most common way to organize your speech, especially your informative speeches coming up. So just some main tips on your main points, things you want to keep in mind. Keep your points separate, A, B, C. Look for some kind of pattern. The first way, the second way, the first thing they accomplished, the second thing they accomplished, and you want to have your points balanced. So if you're doing a 5-minute speech and say you've got a minute for your intro, maybe 30 seconds for your conclusion, then you want to maybe look at doing about a minute 15, minute 30 tops for each of your points. So they're each balanced. You don't want to spend 3 minutes on one point and then 20 seconds on the other ones, because you're going to lose us. We're not going to understand what's going on. So next thing I want to talk about, once you figure out what your organization is of your main points, how are you going to connect them? I can't emphasize enough how important connectives are. Otherwise, it's real easy to lose your audience because you're just blowing through all the information and we don't really know what's going on. We don't know what points you're trying to make. I always notice that professional speakers, whenever you see a professional speech made, if you ever watch TED Talks, their connectives are always very, very, very clear. You always know what is the first point, what is the second point. But it makes for a great speech. I think having a good connective is what makes the difference between a good speaker and a so-so speaker. So something to keep in mind. So 4 different ways to connect your points: transition, internal preview, internal summary, and signpost. So that's what we're going to finish up with today. So basically a transition is just letting us know that, hey, I finished talking about this one thing and now we're going to talk about the next thing. So we can follow along, and it helps you remember more and pay attention to the speech a little more too. So here's an example of a transition. I've spoken so far of Cesar Chavez's community organizer work, as a community organizer, but it was his work as a labor leader that truly etched his name into American history. So I have showed you the main body of the mandolin, but it's actually the neck that creates the unique sound of the mandolin. I'm making the speech up as I go along. So one way to do a transition is an internal preview when I say, what am I going to tell you next? So you're ready, so you know what to expect. So an example of an internal preview, in discussing how Asian Americans have been stereotyped by the mass media, we'll first look at the origins and then second at the continuing impact. So I'm previewing what's coming up in the speech. You could also do an internal summary transition, and that's where you are summarizing what you just said. And then you can even preview what's coming up too. So an example of a summary transition, in short, palm reading is an ancient art developed in China. It was practiced in classical Greece and Rome, flourished during the Middle Ages, survived the Industrial Revolution, and remains popular in many parts of the world. That would be a perfect conclusion. So file that away. You can use an internal summary as your conclusion. You're just recapping your points, basically, and telling us what you told us. Signposts are, I think, the most obvious way for a transition. You're basically giving us a sign of, you know, if you were doing your demonstration speech, okay, step one to making a good pie is to find a good crust. Step two is to put together your stuff for the inside. Ingredients. And step three is to bake it in the oven. So my signpost was step. If you think about, you know, when you're on a road trip and you see a sign and, you know, maybe Lambert's has signs all over Missouri, and you see one sign that says Lambert's, home of third rolls, 30 miles. And then you go a little ways, Lambert's, home of third rolls, 20 miles. And then you go a little ways, Lambert's, home of third rolls, coming up in 10 miles. Those are signposts. So kind of gives you a visual, lets you know like what's coming up consistently. So a great example, first cause of this problem, second cause of this problem, final cause of this problem. So you're using the same words, like using the same sign. So our brains go, oh, he's going to the second cause. Oh, he's going to the third cause. Makes it super easy to follow along. So I hope that helps you. Gives you a little bit of an idea on how to organize your speech, whether it's topical, spatial, problem solution, cause solution, cause effect. And once you have that figured out, then when you're working on your speech, you can figure out what are your transitions, because you're going to need to include your transitions in your outline. So that is something that you're going to need to be thinking about. So your only assignment right now is to start thinking about topics for your informative speech. I will post a list this week of just some brainstorming ideas for informative speech topics to help you in case you're kind of stuck. But I always say, do your speech on something that you're interested in, maybe something you already know a little bit about. It can be a person, place, thing. It can be anything for your informative speech. So be thinking about what you might want to do. Because then next week I will assign your topic proposal. So you're going to need to know what that is. Comment, like, however, tells me that you watched this video, so I know you were here and hopefully you're not asleep. And I will count that as your attendance for this week. The only other item is obviously if you don't have a computer, you don't have consistent internet, and you need help with that, let me know, because the university is being amazing, and our department head, Kim Berry, wants to know who needs help, who needs assistance, who needs to come into campus to use a computer and things like that, and they're going to be happy to help you. So thanks, guys. Hope you're doing all right, and I will see you in a couple days. Thanks.